Welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here on Black Star Network. And today we are continuing our series on putting in the work, and school is about to begin. And so we're talking about all of these things related to what it means to be an educator, administrator, and to deal with students. And I know that oftentimes people think that teachers are not doing their best, but they are doing the best they can with the resources they have. They're qualified, certified, ready to go, and are putting out programs that really matter to the students and to their families. And today we're going to be talking to two subject matter experts who are really top in their field. We'll be talking to Dr. Stacey Owens, owner, founder of Creating Z, as well as Levita Marshall, who is our resident, not only reading expert, but also an individual who works with teachers, educators, and administrators, and just moving life forward in the areas in which they find themselves. Come on in, ladies. Let's have this conversation, because as students have gone back to school, so many things are happening politically, and oftentimes parents are wondering, should they homeschool their kids? Should they put their children in a school? When is a good time to pull them out of school if things are not going in their area the way they believe they need to be? And you guys are right in the middle, in the forefront of all of what is happening. So I want to start this conversation this morning with Dr. Stacey Owens, newly minted PhD. So exciting. Dr. Stacey, let's jump right in, because you are in this space of ownership.
Correct.
So let's drive this bus toward this conversation of, one, tell us about Creating Z and what it means and stands for. And then in your community, what do your schools represent for families?
Okay, so we'll start with Creating Z. I've had, over my journey of education, I've had a wonderful experience in participating in several roles, from being a classroom teacher to working at state level to opening a private school and a charter school. So Creating Z, that's my nonprofit on the side that sort of captures the whole story of my entire journey. So you'll notice that I'm an author, I sort of write my books, and I go out and provide professional development. So when we're talking about Creating Z, that's everything Zecca, everything that is around my journey of education. I just funnel it through my nonprofit called Creating Z.
So with that experience in Creating Z, your first school is K through 8. In your K through 8 environment, what are the students learning? And I'm not going to ask you what's different, because I know that your traditional education is being taught. Even though the model is not traditional, you provide some additional things to your students to help them feel well-rounded. And then I want to dive into, how do you protect and take care of your staff?
Okay, so just for clarification, so Creating Z, that's just sort of my own thing. The charter school is under my nonprofit called Zecca Inc. And Zecca Inc. stands for 0 to 18 Education Concepts Academy. So years ago, I had this dream of creating a space where I would be able to begin the journey of working with students before they were even born, so at birth, and then follow them through the age of 18. And so that is how I birthed Zecca Inc. And then under Zecca Inc. is my initiative, Zecca School of Arts and Technology, which is our K-8 charter school. And so with the K-8 charter school, we have the autonomy to create programming that is a little slight different from the traditional school setting. And so for us, we started out wanting to integrate like the arts in our learning. So in our math class and reading class, we envision using the art standards to teach those students. We wanted to have that safe space for students to come in and use their technology. That was the basis of the starting of our origin story. But what I actually found out is, once we opened up, things were going on in the lives of our children that was making it hard for them to successfully engage in the learning in traditional settings. And this is not to say it's anything bad against traditional school systems, because they have some wonderful programming as well. But in my area, we had some kids that was having a hard time from that social and emotional side, having that hard time with balancing life, having a hard time with, flushing out trauma so that they can be productive in school. And so I became that haven in my community where if I had a child that was in that space, their parents would come to my school. And so I had to do a reset in that, because I was thinking when I first started the school that I was just going to have this nice little performing arts school and everybody was going to come in and be creative and learn. And then I got, oh, wait, we have some other stuff that we have to flush out. And so that's one of the biggest differences that I would say today, that if I had to do a comparison to the traditional schools in my area and myself, is that we have a heavy focus on the whole child. We have to make sure that as every child enter my building, we look at you from every angle and find out what is your needs. If it's a need for food, a need for clothing, a need for emotional support, what need do you have? What is hindering you from being successful and being able to not only be successful as you enrolled in our school, but I want you to leave as an 8th grader and go to high school and be successful and then graduate and be able to be a productive citizen. And so that whole school model is sort of kind of where we're at now.
I love that. I want to bring Levita into this conversation because something that you mentioned, that it was your vision and your goal to make certain that you could see the connections from grade level to grade level. And I know, Levita, we often talk about in education the value and importance of that level of continuity, that teachers either in some settings will follow students as they're growing. But what are some of the benefits and advantages of students staying in one school the entire time? And then there's persons who can actually see how they're growing, how they're developing, in their reading, in their math, and their social and emotional skills.
Oh, that is such a great point, because my experience, and I know most of the experiences for elementary educators, and I'm sure secondary as well, is that your goal as an educator, as an administrator, is that you're trying to create a school family. And on a lot of the campuses that I was a part of, you really, really do feel like it's a family. You see these children from when they come in, sometimes at 3 years old, if you have one of those preschool programs, and they are with you until they're almost 11 years old. That is a very large chunk of their formative years. And so creating that really safe space where these children can thrive, where it really and truly feels like a family, it's such a great, great opportunity. I actually, one of my experiences when I worked in a city outside of Houston was they had this concept where they were actually in small families. And so there were 4 teachers in this particular quadrant, is what I'm going to call it. And basically the students would stay within these 4 teachers. And so they would go from 1st grade to 2nd grade to 3rd grade to 4th grade within this particular quadrant of teachers. And it was the most amazing model I had ever seen. And they literally did call it their family. So they gave it a particular name, and whatever, the name they came up with, they called it that particular family. And so those children were with those same students, with those same teachers for, 4 years of their educational career. And it was such a great bond. And it was actually my first educational experience. I was actually a paraprofessional in that school. I started out with a degree in psychology, was initially going to go into clinical psychology. And while I was in graduate school, I was working on this campus as a paraprofessional. And so I became a part of this particular family, and my focus just changed. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm in love with education. I'm going to make a whole entire switch here. And so that's when I got the bug. It was a wonderful time, and I learned a great deal from that particular school. And so it kind of set me on my journey to education.
I appreciate you talking about the family units that happen. And Stacey, you and how you work with your employees, you provide not only a safe place for your students, for them to grow, but you also provide this safe haven for your faculty. How valuable, Stacey, is it for spaces where teachers work to feel as if they're valued and are important to the vision and the lifeblood of what happens in a school system?
Yeah, that's very important. I mean, and I sort of stumbled into that space as well because, again, when I started, I had this huge focus on, the arts. Then I had to shift to the emotional well-balance of students. And then when I was in that moment, because when you go through your teacher education program, as a teacher and as an administrator, they really didn't talk about the emotional well-being of teachers. It was almost like you had to just come in and put on that smile and be a great teacher. That's what you're taught. You're taught everything on how to improve students and how to work with students, but not really yourself. It's just your job. This is your job. And so teachers get in that space where they begin to do what I call emotional labor, where you have to put on this persona for the sake of your job. You have to smile when you're sad. You have to be, happy when you're tired. You have to always show a forefront. And you can't really, it's not expected for you to bring those emotions in the building and express them. Well, over time, what I found is that my teachers, when I wasn't dealing with that emotional health of teachers, they were coming in and doing their best, but it was impacting the kids. And as much as they tried to leave that baggage at the door, it was still making it into the classroom. And so now we have these behaviors that's triggered by sometimes by teachers. Mm-hmm. And our students were triggering teachers. And so I had to stop. And when I was in that lesson stage and say, oh boy, we got to do something about the emotional well-being of our teachers as well. And so I redesigned that program and I was like, nope, you're going to bring your baggage in with you. I want you to do that, but we got to unpack it. And we have to unpack it in a healthy way because you as a teacher have to be in a healthy state in order for you to be healthy in the classroom and be able to be productive in the classroom. And so we went in and I put a lot of professional development in place. I restructured my entire facility. So if you walk into our school, we have what's called a reset room with massage chairs and coffee bars, and you go in the lounge, it's massage chairs and exercise machines. And it's just a lot of tools so that you as the adult can self-regulate. The same thing that we're teaching kids that they have to learn how to self-regulate their emotions. I need my teachers to be able to do that too. We also created spaces where we talked about it, where the open door policy became very clear that you can come in and talk about some things. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm going to have an answer for you. Doesn't mean that I'm going to change it because I'm still your boss. I'm not your therapist. I don't put myself in a therapy role. And I do advise all adults to have a coach, a mentor, a therapist, all of that. But I had to create a work environment where they felt safe and comfortable and being able to come in and say what they needed to say. And we give some supports. I had to put boundaries in place. I put norms in place for the team to say, here's acceptable ways that we can do this so that we can hold each other accountable as well. So those are just some of the measures that I readjusted the environment to create this space to say it's no longer taboo to say that I'm in a space, but we have to always know that you are responsible for improving that space that you're in. I just provide the tools.
I love that. When we come back after the break, we're going to continue this conversation because oftentimes outside of what happens in your home, in your community, in your neighborhood, putting in the work as an educator and an administrator really does require to put in the work. We're going to talk a little bit about classroom management and the toll that it takes. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. And I hope that you have your pen, pad, and digital device together and ready, because in this season of academics and education, K through 12, there is a lot going on historically. And oftentimes it takes people that you can talk to in your space so that you'll be able to understand how to navigate not only your role as a teacher, but also some of the other aspects of things that are happening in your life. I want to talk to Levita about this for a moment, because one of the things that we are clear about is that teachers' colleges and teacher programs do not prepare you for everything that happens in the building. Let's talk for a little bit about classroom management and the dynamics of it, because I know in a lot of ways, classroom management, when the centers are right, when the students know what they're supposed to do, when the expectations have been laid, that time period can go extremely well. But there's always that wild card factor, which is behavior. And how does the understanding of how classroom management is supposed to work can help teachers navigate staying sane, safe, and comfortable in their learning environment?
Right. So just like you said, and initially, back to school days are those days where you are establishing all of those routines and procedures that are really going to set the foundation of how that entire school year is going to flow. So if you have those set, if you have those established, and the children are just repeating and rehearsing and repeating and rehearsing, that is going to make a major difference in your classroom behavior, expectations, and which is what we call them. We don't like to say rules anymore, but we say these are the expectations. And one of the things that we're actually doing in school districts now is that we're creating those with the students. So, gone are the days where the teacher has written all the rules and expectations on a big poster board and post them up. No, we actually are sitting down with the students and saying, hey, how do we want our classroom to go? What is going to make this a safe space? And that goes back to that social emotional learning. That's all a part of that. It's bringing those children in so they can have buy-in on how the classroom is going to be set up. It kind of reminds me, if you guys are familiar with how Habitat for Humanity, if they build homes, they don't just build a home and just hand over the key. That family has to come in and they have to help put up a piece of lumber. They have to put in a bush. They have to, put in a faucet or a sink. And so they have buy-in into their own process. And that's kind of what we're doing in schools now, is to have those children come together. That's actually part of the first few weeks routines and procedures, is to have the entire class come together, say, hey, what is going to make this classroom flow? What's going to make us feel safe? And how is this going to make us a school family? And so also, like you said, there's going to be those outliers, and that's going to always happen. But, for the most part, when you do have routines and procedures in place, your classroom will flow a lot smoother.
So I have a follow-up question to that, Levita, because one of the things that ends up happening, depending on how long you've been an educator, you are still in the do as I say mode, because I've been doing this for decades and I have my own system. Where is that push and pull for the teacher who says, no, you have to make the kids do it this way, otherwise they won't do what you say? But then you have this newly minted 1 year, 3 year, 5 year teacher who's saying, no, students need a little bit of autonomy. They should have a say in what they do. And then there's this clash of generations of educators. How do systems, because you worked in Christian school system, you worked in traditional education, you worked in rural, you've worked in city. Where is there a meeting of the minds or how generational teachers can survive their work environment and work together well? Because there's still faculty meetings, department meetings, small pod meetings of leaders in that space who are still managing the role of this student's education. How do they make this work together? And what are some of the models you've seen that do work to help teachers who may be viewing and saying, I work with somebody that's been here for 30 years and I just got here. And I think what I can do work too, and we need to meet in the middle somewhere.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly right. Sometimes, so I've done both. I've mentored and coached new teachers, and I've mentored and coached veteran experienced teachers. And it is a vast difference in their attitudes. However, each generation brings something good to the table. So one of the things that I always had to remind myself when I was coaching, when I was mentoring, which I just did this past school year, was people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so for those experienced teachers, I would sit down and literally, like for the first 2 sessions that I was with them, I literally just listened. I just let them vent. And, one of the things we know in coaching, Jackie, is that you have to listen to understand. They want to be understood. Experienced teachers are not there by accident. They are very veteran teachers who are highly knowledgeable in their skill set. So you really do want to take the time to listen to what they have to say. And you don't want to, that colloquialism, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Everything that they've done, it has gotten them to this point. However, I always, after I've listened to them for a couple of sessions, I said, hey, we have new teachers who are here. This is a new generation of learning. Oh my goodness, I think I started in 1994. It looks drastically different in 2025 from 1994. I mean, drastically different. I did not use any technology back then. And so I listened to their concerns and just remind them, hey, this is the way it is. Our world is changing. For veteran teachers, we have to be able to usher in students into a ever-changing, ever-evolving world. So we cannot stay in the 90s. We cannot. There are some things that you can bring that are helpful, but there are some things we literally have to leave back there because it's for the students. Remember what's best for students. And with the new teachers on the flip side, some of them can be, hey, I got this, I just got my degree, just got my, like you said, teacher's college, I just did my student teaching just last semester, my classroom, my babies, and they have a lot to glean from veteran teachers, a lot. Oh my goodness. So it's just this mutual listening to understand. It really, really is a mutual understanding of each other. I'm going to take some things from new teachers. I'm going to take some things from veteran teachers, and we are going to mesh those two together. And the thing that we always say around our campuses when, you get into these little heated discussions and faculty meetings, we always have this phrase and we say, what's best for kids? Remember, do what's best for kids.
I like that. I'm going to jump to break early because I need to follow up with Stacy on something that Levita said related to faculty. When we come back, because we're talking about this information related to schools and where to send our kids, when we come back after the break, let's dive in because we want to give our parents some understanding about just how well prepared teachers are. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Welcome back, everybody. And I want to jump right in with Stacey because, Dr. Stacey, I have to say that a couple of times because, I kept saying she's going to do this, she's going to do it, and it is here. And I love the wealth of knowledge that both of you are bringing to this dialogue and conversation. Now, Stacey, I have been to your workshop and your conferences, and you spend a lot of time training charter school educators, training others who want to jump into this space, helping teachers find safety in the classroom and in the buildings where they work. Talk a little bit about your model for faculty development and enrichment, and the importance of taking the time to provide, teachers with more than what they got when they graduated from their teachers program.
Yeah, okay. Because you're right. When they graduate from the teachers program, and I'm gonna add another point to that, the space that we're getting teachers from today looks different. So it's great to get someone that actually graduate from a teachers program, and you'll find that oftentimes it's not until they get in the classroom that you learn the experience. The experience is what really teach you another layer of what was not discussed in the teacher education program. And then in the nature of education right now, you're getting a lot of people who are going into education as a second career. So I like to call them the backdoor people. They didn't go to a education program. You got your degree in something else, human resource. And now you decided, I want to be a teacher. So you're going through these residency programs to get these add-ons so that you can become a teacher. So now you have some skill ability, but you're lacking a lot of content ability, and you're lacking some of those, pieces that are connected to child development and how kids learn. And you're in a classroom now having to apply those things. And so because we have this national wide thing going on with teacher shortages, and we're having to be creative with people that we put into the classrooms, I had to rephrase my model to say, if I'm going to be educating a whole child, and I know that I have this population that's coming to me with all of these supports that they need, who am I putting in front of them? Because if I put someone in front of them that's not adequately prepared, then they're going to lose from the start. They're going to fail right out the gate. So I changed my school day. And I know when I share this, a lot of time other administrators, they'll say, whoa, how'd you do that? But, and they'll say, well, do I really want to do this? But I changed our model so that we went to a 4-day program. So our students are in the building Tuesday through Fridays from 8 to 5. So I know people will say 8 to 5, that's a long time. Well, it is, but you don't feel it because the kids have, art classes, and they have a whole lot. I get everything I need from the child from 8 to 5. And when the kids go home, we don't do homework and that kind of thing because my teachers get everything they need while the kids is here. And then I took those Mondays and I turned those into professional development days. So every Monday, the teachers are starting the week, setting the tone for the week. They're in some type of training. And the trainings are not all full day. They're half-day trainings. And then I give them the other portion of their day so that they can prepare their lessons and prepare for putting into practice the things that we are discussing in the professional development time. And let me just say this, on the 4 days, Tuesday through Friday, they still get a planning period. So if you look at some of the complaints, when you talk about teacher turnover, one of the things that teachers say that make them leave the field is that they don't have time. they don't have time to plan, that they're in these planning sessions. Well, when we have planning sessions, somebody's going to bother me with a meeting, or somebody's going to bother me with some professional development. So what I did, because we all have the same 24 hours, I just restructured my time so that I put that professional piece for them to always work on self-improvement in place intentionally, in a setting that it doesn't cause them stress, because they still also have time built in where they can do those professional expectations like lesson planning and things like that and don't feel overwhelmed. It gives balance. And so that helped them, because I have professional development. When I can look out in my building and know that I have 40% of my population, that this is their second field and they're coming in out the gate without, the necessary background training, that even that little piece that they would have got from a teacher education program, I got to fill that gap in. Mm-hmm. And so I just do that 4-day model.
I think a 4-day model works. I think, Levita, we're state of Texas people, and I know that all around people are still tossing this idea once again about the 4-day academic week for students. When we think about that, Levita, does that create a balance, and will it be difficult for people to shift their brain? It's one thing to come into a model that is working and you know what you're getting, but somewhere midstream, mid-career, we're saying 4 days a week with still all of the other things that are going on, that you still have to grade papers. They're still going to have homework. Would this model work? Because I know we talk about it like every 2 years. It comes up again. For teachers who are already struggling, how do they make sense of what they don't have control? Because I think a lot of the burnout is not having balance, and no one's thinking about the mental and emotional well-being of the educator.
Correct. That is the most incredible model. Oh my goodness. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the school that I was just mentoring. So I was a part of this program at a middle school. It was actually through the college that I got my degree from. They had a program. It was basically an educator residency model. That's what it was. And it was meant to support and undergird these teachers at this particular, it was a charter school, middle school. So as you know, like you said, they're coming from second careers and they didn't go through these educator programs. And as you were talking about that, Dr. Stacey, I was thinking, my God, I wish they had this at that school, because one of the challenges that I had was, while I was on the campus mentoring them, there was only maybe one. I was the certified teacher, but I was only mentor, and the principal was certified. And maybe there was one other person who was certified. And I was thinking, well, how are they getting experience? One of the components of the program was for them to go and observe another classroom, but they were observing a classroom of someone who was in this pretty much the same boat as them. Like you said, it was the back doorway into education. That 4-day model, I'm willing to try anything else, because if we look at the history of our schools, we're literally on the same, basically, historical track that we have been on since the creation of U.S. school system. It is literally the same model that we've been using for the longest time. And I'm at this point where I am just willing to say, we have got to try something different. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. We have got to try something different. And what you're doing at that school, that 4-day week, believe me, as an educator, as someone who's a mentor and a coach to educators, to have 1 day every single week for professional development, oh my goodness, just for you to be with your colleagues, to plan as a grade level, just for you to plan on your own and not carry this massive amount, the big cart that, we all pull off of campus all the time. That is an amazing model. There is actually a school district that's probably about 10 minutes away from me that actually implemented that. So I'm really, really excited to see how that goes for them. And it's a public school district, actually. I'm very excited to see how that goes for them. They got a lot of buy-in from the community. So it's really exciting to see that we're just kind of restructuring the model. This model is ages old, and it is absolutely time for us to do something different.
I have a question for both of you, because as we think about our systems going into that model, and I know for state to state, it'll be a state decision. For parents who push back on the 4-day work week and who will not know what to do with their children on the day that they are not at school, Stacey, what are some of the things that parents can do with their kids? And do you have community support for children to have other engagement or activities? And then Levita, the same for you when Stacey's done.
Yes, surprisingly, I did not receive a lot of pushback from our parents. As a school of choice, I guess they sort of know coming in that this is what we do, and they can make those decisions if this is the right place for them. A lot of the changes that my parents made once they decided, yes, I'm going to go for a week, they either work with their employers so that Mondays became their day off. They aligned their work schedule to that. And if they could not do it that way, they worked out where their students or their children would stay home with family members, or some of the local childcare centers who take, after school care and before school care, they actually enrolled them in childcare for that day if they wasn't old enough to stay home by themselves. We have supplemental programs that students can do online. So they sort of restructured their Monday so that was time for them to work on those packets, or time for them to log into the computer and do some of those things. I mean, parents got really creative with what they would do on the Mondays, and haven't had any complaints about it. They just scheduled their life around it. So it's working out pretty good for us.
Absolutely. Levita.
Yeah, so in my experience, most of the public schools that I worked in have what is called extended learning or extended day programs. And so basically, even the days that we actually had professional development days, those would be available to those families for the entire, day for them. So I believe that that's what a lot of those districts now in Texas are doing. They are making those extended learning and extended day centers into just full days, for that particular day. So it really does give those parents, the opportunity to not have a lot of disruption, because I know, like you said, that this is going to be a little different from the charter school than the public school, but we do have those centers in place at almost every school district that I've been a part of.
That's wonderful. When we come back after the break, let's talk about students and what is their responsibility in their success journey. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. And I hope that you are taking good notes and have some great insight on how to navigate this particular school year with all of the changes and all of the infrastructures that are taking place where you are. There's one person who has a responsibility in the learning experience and how they conduct themselves when they're in the building. So let's talk for a moment about the responsibility of students, both Levita and Dr. Stacy. What is the student's responsibility in the academic environment? And does it start when they get on the bus and get to school, or does it start when they walk in the building? Because I know expectations around the globe are different. Dr. Stacy.
You know, I tell my kids they have one job, and that is to come to school, be a good student, and learn, improve yourself. Everybody around me has to grow within self first. So, you know, students have a big part of it. They have to know I call it the art of going to school. Do you understand school as a system? And we teach that. Here's the norms, here are the expectations. Here's how this system works for you. And then we expect for you to come and work the system. And so, yes, students have to know how to go to school and follow directions, be in control of their emotions, and how do you improve yourself academically every single day.
So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question related to that, because do you find in your particular environment, because I know where you are in traditional school is different, and I'm going to talk to Levita about this from the traditional school perspective. But when it comes to the student's responsibility and engagement, what is also that parent's responsibility with that student? And do you find you have the support that you need based on expectation?
Right. So I tell my parents that it's a triangular effect, right? This only works if it's three people at the table. The teachers have to be at the table, the student have to be at the table, and so does the parent. And if we have this triangular effect, we will create a successful student who will be able to just thrive wherever and in any situation that they're placed in. So parent support is necessary. Now, sometimes you can say that all you want, but when you pull in, you're going to have some parents that's going to jump in and they're going to know how to provide that support. They're going to want to read with their student, work with their student, hold their student accountable for their behaviors. They're going to come to your conferences. They're going to talk to you. They're going to ask questions. They're going to do all that. And then you have some parents who you can barely get them to answer the phone or to show up to any of your conferences or to stay engaged. And so when I find that I have a parent that's in that situation, then I take a little deeper look and I look at, you know, what's going on. I try to figure out, build relationships with them. I try to figure out, you know, their origin stories of how do they navigate themselves through the system of education, because they may have had a bad experience. And if they had a bad educational experience and any trauma was surrounding that, then they're not going to feel comfortable with coming in and engaging in those conversations. So I have to make sure that we create an environment that is conducive to that population as well, so I can help you work through some of that traumatic stuff that you might have had to go through so that you can be present for what your child needs you to be present with. So meeting everybody where they are and their needs and what they need to be able to produce is something that we heavily focus on, and that comes through that relationship piece that we create, the teacher-to-teacher relationship, teacher-to-student relationship, teacher-to-parent relationship. And then from an administrative piece, I focus really heavy on my admin to teacher relationships, my admin to student relationships, and my admin to parent relationships. And I make sure that I'm relatable to all populations, because the more that they trust you, the more they'll open up, and you can get people who won't do certain things in some places. They come and they'll do it with the right person if they feel safe to do so and to show up as themselves.
I like that, showing up as themselves, because all of those things are important. While we're still in this block, I want to ask Levita from a traditional teacher perspective related to parent engagement and the expectations for this block 4. Are parents prepared to send their kids to school and do the things? I ask this question on the verge right now of the school district who has just banned parents from coming to school looking like they just got out of bed. Yeah. So what are the expectations of parents when they come to this building with their children?
I saw that. On I think a principal was relieved of his duties for for posting. Yeah, he had the graphics and he had all of that. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay. So my thing is, I like what Dr. Stacey says. You don't know where people are coming from. You don't. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. We have expectations at schools, we have standards at schools, but you cannot parent other parents. You can't do that, and you can't police them. But we do have standards and expectations that, hey, this is what we choose to abide by at this particular campus or this particular district. And so we just, and for the most part, everyone does that. You're going to have the outliers who are going to just do whatever they want. But like I said, I'm not trying to, parent parents or police parents, but because you really have to establish relationships. Like she was saying, if you don't have an established relationship, like I said, nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. I've already been there. I've been in that situation where I had parents who have done that. And I'm not going to say a thing until I build rapport with them, until they know, oh my gosh, you love my baby so much. Oh my goodness. Okay. That's when I might have a conversation like, hey, we're going to have this open house. You know what? It's going to be, like professional dress. I'm not having those kind of conversations at all before I establish any kind of rapport, any kind of, line of communication with parents at all. It's just, that's going to start you off on just a bad, start from the beginning with their child. And you're the person who is with their child all day long. And so I just think you really need to, establish that rapport first.
I think that both of what both are saying is important, because oftentimes they're small. Little kids see how their parent was treated. They see whether or not their parent gets angry. They see whether or not their parents cry. And so then that child then has something projected on them from another adult toward their parent. And I think sometimes that may give children, a bad taste in their mouth about, I don't want to go to school. They were mean to my mom. I don't want to go to school because they said something, that made them feel a type of way. How hard is it going to be for adults to just keep their mouth shut? That's the only way, because Levita, you say this all the time. So for those of you who do not know, Levita Marshall's favorite quote is this: you do not always have to give voice to thought. So Levita, can you unpack that for us and explain why keeping your mouth shut is sometimes the best course of action?
I'm serious. That's what I was saying. You don't know where people are coming from. You don't know. You don't have to feel entitled to say everything about everybody all the time. And especially, in that arena of children and dealing with babies and their parents and, well, these days it's the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, the whole tribe and the whole village is, who they're living with. I just think that's just, you need to just tread, very lightly. I'm not talking about being intimidated. Like I said, we still have standards and expectations that we want to uphold in our schools, but you need to tread, very lightly when you're dealing with human relationships here. And you want to establish very, very good communication. You don't want to turn people off from coming up to the school, volunteering, especially, younger parents who they don't know how things, should go, and they may be just trying their best. So my goodness, watch your mouth, watch your words.
I can relate that. Dr. Stacey, what do you say about that? Because you have a very close-knit unit, but then people have come from places where they've been hurt, by other schools. And how do you mend that?
Well, one, I want to extend on what Levita was saying. I like to say you got to be comfortable sometimes with having the second to the last word. you don't always have to have the last word. So listening and knowing when to say when and when to let stuff go and getting your message out and not getting into that power struggle. But mending for me is just, again, creating that safe space and saying, you know, I want to hear you. I want to see you first. I want you to know that I see you first. And then I want you to know that I hear you. And then I want you to know that I'm still going to hold you accountable for your part in this puzzle. And how do I do that is with our professional development for teachers. We also do parent trainings. And I make sure I bring in things like trauma resolve training for parents. I bring in experts to help them to just be able to have that space of talking about what went wrong for you so that we can correct, so that you, can correct it, because the work has to be done through yourself, okay? And then we also provide some needs for parents because we have a little school store. So if my parents come out to the parent training, I feed them. I give them what we call Zecca bucks, which is free money to go in the store and get those things that you need. So it's almost like a give and take, you know, and then that creates us having that family feel like we're in this together. And if they know that my ultimate goal for your baby is to be successful, I'm not going to do everything right. I'm not going to make everybody happy. But if we're working together, I'm going to do the best I can to give you and your child the best results that they need. And you know what? I haven't met a parent yet, good, bad, or indifferent, that don't want what's best for their child.
I love that. When we come back after the break, Lavita Marshall is going to give our reflection on putting in the work. Administrators, educators, and teachers, oh my. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Here's Lavita Marshall.
Let me just say this. A few summers ago, I read the most life-changing book that I've ever read. And it was called What Happened to You? I don't know if anyone has read this, but it's co-authored by Oprah, and she wrote it with, I believe he was either a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. However, it was a very life-changing book for me. Our superintendent actually asked the admins to read this book, and in turn, the campus, the specialist, which I was a specialist, an instructional coach, I read it and I reflected on this book an entire summer. And basically the premise of the book is stop asking people what is wrong with you, and switch that around and start saying, hey, what happened to you? And the byline of the book was, how childhood trauma just really carries on into adulthood and it affects our every single decision. There were a lot of instances for educators, teachers in this particular book. And I really reflected back and I thought, oh my goodness, if I had this book back in 1994, how would my conversations have been different? with parents, with children, because you don't know what they have gone through. You don't know what they're bringing with them on that campus. They are bringing sometimes a lifetime of hurt, pain, and trauma. And that book, just if you can just switch your mindset and say, stop saying, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And even your colleagues, hey, what happened to you? And when I did that the next school year, I was so excited. I love back to school. I love back to school. I love new pencils. I love new smell of school supplies. I just love new beginnings. I implemented that, and that had to have been my best school year ever, like ever. And so I just want to encourage everyone, please, absolutely, please start asking that question. Hey, what happened to you? Start thinking about what have these people gone through? You're talking about little people is what we call them, and they've only been on this earth for a short period of time. My goodness, what has happened to them?